Who are the real enemies of the humans on this planet? When I listen valuetainment, the Soros connection, who OWNS and controls American universities. I understand that Patrick Bet David does not understand the real game behind all these events and in general, the sick and Machiavellian. Sorry, he is not an Armenian game played by the system that I call the cabal/the pyramid. Soros, Gates, Muse, Bezos, and many others like them are the chosen ones who are implementing the orders coming from the top. It is true that these players are marketed to the world as the richest people. Sorry, but they are not at all. The money on paper that they have does not belong to them. They are smart actors who could be Oscar winners. The same goes for all the different layers within the pyramid that anyone would think that they are the big bosses. You should always ask yourselves why any Jewish person like Soros would finance Palestinians and terrorist groups. It is not logical for the normal street person to understand, but when you decipher their thinking logic you will understand, but you will still be confused because you will say that it does not make any sense. Very true, and this is why they are so Machiavellian and brilliant in their satanical thinking methodology. This is not a new phenomenon, but these families on top of the pyramid have been doing it for years. I am going to give you a few examples of their games. When we call the Palestinians, Iranians, ISIS, Hamas, Boko Haram, and many more of these brands, you will need to understand that they are all created by men, and they did not suddenly come from the moon or Mars. The fact that in order to create a terrorist group you will need a lot of financing, logistics, supplies. Your question should be, who can afford them? This is a very important question to understand. You will need to add to your equation that at the very top nobody is an enemy but actors are told to play this role. For example, China, Russia, and the US are not enemies. They are all directed by the same system at the very top, and most of their players wouldn't even understand and know why. I think at this point I would be labeled as a crazy conspiracy theorist. That is fine and very normal because your minds have been trained in a very simple logical way, and anything that is not logical would be considered crazy. If you remember, after the October 7th attack by the so-called Hamas/Palestinians, Netanyahu openly told during an interview that he has been financing Hamas. This was not very smart for him to openly say it, but it was covered up very quickly and nobody cared or asked any questions about his statement. It is very easy to manipulate information when you own all the media outlets, including social media. Let's talk about ISIS. Have you ever seen ISIS attacking Israel? They never did. Here is the genius of the cabal. You create and own your own enemies and keep the world believing and occupy their minds with fear and chaos. These strategies are all coming from the same genius called Machiavelli the Prince. I am sure this will not be acceptable by the censure because it would imply that the same people who are the victims are as well the owners. When you are on top and own the world, you do not care that millions or billions of people could be dead. You look at them as casualties for the great cause. This was very similar at a lower level of thinking when Ben Gavir and his group members in Israel and in the US called the Palestinians and the Arabs/Muslims animals that are only good to be slaughtered. I understand I had to go to the lower layers of actions from the pyramid in my examples. You can add as well to the same the 9/11 event, which was as well planned and executed by the same cabal. It is very simple to understand the basis of a portion of their equation. You create a thesis and an antithesis, which means you create the good cop and the bad cop. The US, the UK, Israel, and the EU, including the Commonwealth nations, the good guys, and the rest the bad and dangerous people. Look at Saddam Hussein and Noriega, created by the same people and later taken out as very dangerous criminals. The same strategy is applied to people like Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, Tung, Xi Jinping, Putin, Erdogan, Orban, and many more. The new China, which I call China 2.0, has been financed and created by the bankers of the City of London. The same family is one of the owners of the Fed and most of the central banks in the world. China 20 years ago was a starving poor country. Look at it today, surpassing the US economy and lending money to its so-called enemy, the US. Is this a joke? Have you ever asked yourselves, why would China buy US government bonds that are like toilet paper? Coming back to our main story, you won't understand why a Jewish billionaire would finance its enemies because you cannot think like them. As much as the human brain cannot understand anything that is not three-dimensional like the cosmos and the concept of infinity, you will struggle to accept how sick cabal's owner's mind functions. If you think that Russia is the enemy of the West, you did not understand anything. Just a small example before I end with this. Who created the war in Ukraine and who stopped any peace agreements? The same group that has been milking the taxpayers for centuries, creating wars on our planet. War is a great business, and only the ones that create and finance are the winners.